I'm with Elaine Roberts from World Mandate Ministries, and we're talking about her book, Seven Tears of Joseph. Now, Elaine, what is the book about?
Well, the book, The Seven Tears of Joseph, is about the seven tears of Joseph. And the story of Joseph in the Bible I've always loved that story. And I've read it, I can't even tell you how many times I've read it. It's probably the one story that I read in entirety. I don't go back, it's not a sort of bits that I go back to. I generally read it in entirety. And I've read it countless times, too numerous to say, oh, this many times. And on one occasion, I noticed, the way my brain is wired, I spot patterns and I spot numbers. And I thought, he cries seven times. And it says, and he wept, and he wept. And I counted that seven times. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. So then I started to study each time that he cried. And each time that he cried, there was something different happening in his life. And we know the story of Joseph, or for those who don't know the story of Joseph, in a nutshell, his 11 brothers betray him, his brothers turn on him, they betray him, they stitch him up, he ends up in jail in a foreign country. There's a famine in their country, the country that he's living in, Egypt. They come to Egypt because that's where there's food, and they stand before Joseph, who has now been elevated to, it's almost like assistant prime minister. They don't recognize him, but he recognizes them. And so that's the time for him to wreak his revenge if he wanted to, but he doesn't. So the seven tears of Joseph, they explain, each tear is explained in detail as to why he cries on that occasion. And so it moves from he's angry with them. He sees them, he recognizes them, he says, you, and he is angry and boiling with rage. And every tear, every set of tears describes a different set of emotions that he's going through until you come to the final set of tears where he is open, loving, he completely and unreservedly forgives them, he welcomes them, loves them unconditionally. So the seven tears move from boiling rage and anger, seething and pent up fury, to unprecedented, unconditional love, open heart, loving forgiveness towards his brother. And it's a journey. So those seven tears depict a journey of healing, of restoration within Joseph and within his family. That's it in a nutshell. There's a
Well,
big nutshell, no, but that's the nutshell.
now you're talking about Joseph and the things that he goes through, but do you also talking about personal experience as well?
Well, I do talk about personal experience. I've had members of my own family killed and murdered, and I think maybe that's why I love that episode in the Bible so much, because it, from myself, where I've had to forgive people that have murdered members of my family, people that have killed members of my family, and having one sort of family member killed is enough. Two is more than enough. But we've had four,
Well,
and each time I've had that deep call within to have to reach out and to reach up to God for grace and power to forgive. Was it easy? I'm not going to say it was easy, but what I have learned after all these years is that forgiveness is easier. So the seven tears of Joseph, the book is not simply about the seven tears, while it does dwell on that majorly. I give testimony of where I've had to forgive killers of my own family members, but also explaining why forgiveness is important and how to forgive. Because, I think everybody knows forgiveness is the right way, but it talks about, well, how do I do it? How do I forgive? So we talk about that as well. But yeah, having to start, and you can only teach others what you're living yourself. So having to start this journey of forgiving others that have hurt us and hurt me and hurt my family, that was a painful journey, but it's a journey that I believe I'm still on. I know I've completely forgiven those that perpetrated against us. So I know that I'm absolutely free and walk in absolute forgiveness with that. But every day something comes up where I need to forgive somebody. And sometimes it's smaller things than that that gets me really, irritated or, angry. But then I think, no, you have to forgive, Elaine. So I try to go back and walk in forgiveness.
Mm.
But yes, Paul, members of my own family have been killed, and that's
Well,
been difficult.
were these separate incidents or was it all linked together?
No, they were separate incidents. They were different. They were different occasions, spread apart, and having to deal with those on each occasion.
Yeah, yeah.
And one of those members was my own dad,
Mm.
and so that was extremely difficult.
Yeah. Now, the Bible encourages to forgive, but is that a process and does it sometimes take time? And how much
I,
time does
I,
it really take, do you think?
I believe it does take time. I believe it is a journey. For some people, they can forgive, or we can forgive. It doesn't take much to forgive. So if you sort of ran over my foot with your car and say, like, just broke my little toe, and it was an accident, I could forgive you like straight away. I'd say, "Oh, poor man." The whole point of a mistake or an accident is that it was a mistake, and people don't make mistakes on purpose usually. If you say, like, rammed up my foot, did it on purpose, that might take me a little while, maybe a few days or a few weeks to sort of process, well, why did you do that, Paul? But ultimately, I know that in my heart I would forgive, and I would forgive you. I think the things with my family, with my, those that were killed and murdered, because some were premeditated murder and others wasn't premeditated. That took a while. With my dad, I'd say that took less than 12 hours simply because of my cry to God, because I was so distraught and wrecked. But not only that, I had vowed vengeance on those who had done this to him, and I was going to find them and damage them myself. So there was God's intervention in my life. So I think it depends on the deed, the person, they're walking with God and how open they're going to be with God. And with Joseph, what we see, this took a while. This wasn't, 3 days and, oh, come on, brothers, we're okay. It took a while. I haven't quite worked out exactly how long it took. I'm wondering sometimes if it was, maybe months. But I would say yes, Paul. It is a journey, and I think for each individual, it depends. But I would say it shouldn't be a years and years and years long journey. But the thing about forgiveness as well is sometimes people think that when you forgive somebody, you have to be reconciled with them and all buddy buddy and bosom pals. That might not be even wisdom to do that.
Mm.
So forgiveness is about your heart to the other person, releasing the other person from your desire for vengeance or punishment or your own kind of punishment, but being free in your heart, and you can treat that person as though that crime did not exist. But it might be wisdom that you don't be involved with that person because maybe what they inflicted upon you was too damaging, and for your own mental health and maybe your own physical safety, you don't become bosom pals with that person again.
Mm.
So maybe for the woman who's had a jaw broken by a violent husband or partner, maybe, in the fullness of time, she comes to forgive him, but then decides, what, I can't live with you because, until you deal with that issue, you're dangerous. So I think, I always counsel people that are sort of trying to work through forgiveness issues to have someone else that they're working it through with, because sometimes we can get so banged up in our emotions we can't even think straight. And so some people need help and prayerful counsel to navigate that journey of, am I ready to be restored to that person? Should I even be restored, to that person?
Is a lack of forgiveness a big problem in a Christian life and does it affect their walk with God?
Well, I would say it is a big problem because one of the things we pray in the Lord's Prayer is, forgive us our trespasses, or forgive me my trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. So In that prayer, we're saying, please, God, will you forgive me as I forgive those who hurt me? Please, God, will you forgive me as I trespass against you? Forgive me my trespasses against you as I forgive those who trespass against me. So we're saying to God, I'm going to forgive those who hurt me, and I know you're going to forgive me as I hurt you. But God says if we don't forgive others, he won't forgive us. And also, unforgiveness can block so many areas because it's an attitude of the heart. You know, the Bible tells us to take care of the condition of our heart. You know, guard your heart, because out of it, out of your heart flows the issues of life. So if you have a ton of unforgiveness and a ton of bitterness and a ton of anger and a ton of all this other mess, out of your heart is going to flow anger, bitterness, snapping and snarling at people, anger, on all that kind of stuff. And so it will affect your relationship with God. And also God says he cannot hear us. You know, the psalmist says, if I regard iniquity, unforgiveness, bitterness, anger, rage, wrath in my heart, the Lord will not hear me. So we stifle our own prayers when we have unforgiveness. We stifle our relationships with others. And ultimately, unforgiveness, I'm not saying it always does, but it can lead to murder. And we see accounts of that in the Bible. And so we start off with, you've upset me, I'm annoyed with you, I'm upset, and I don't forgive you. But I keep going back to that thing that you did. I keep going back to that thing that you said, and I replay it and replay it. And now I get irritated and I get angry, and then I get resentful. And I walk around now with this resentment for a long time, and it just gets out of control and it loses all perspective, and I become bitter in my heart. And if I'm not careful, you know, the least thing can just light that touch paper and bang, I'm off. And so that's why we have to deal with issues as they occur. And I'm going to say one of the things I do, because we all get offended, we all get upset. And so when something happens and I'm left, like think, oh man, that is so unfair. And why did they do that? And you said this and it's annoyed me. I turn to the Lord immediately and I say, Lord, you know what he did, what she did, or what said. And I'm really upset by it. And I just tell the Lord all about it because he knows anyway. And I just say, but Father, I give that offense to you now. And I give it to you because I know I can't cope with it. And so as I give it away, I've given it to the Lord and it's gone. And I can honestly say, Paul, that when I do that, and even if I think about it, I'm no longer irritated. I'm no longer angry. I'm no longer mad. I'm no longer furious. It's gone. I have peace. And whatever the situation is. Because I know that if I keep that and I dwell on it and then I muster unforgiveness in my own heart, I'm affecting first and foremost my relationship with God. And God will not hear me when I pray. He will not, there's going to be all kinds of other issues. And not only do I affect my relationship with God, I affect my relationship with the enemy. Because I then give the enemy permission to pollute my heart. I open my heart up to the devil for him to attack me and to attack others through me, all through unforgiveness.
Mm. Now, Joseph was a real inspiration, wasn't he? He went through so much in his life, but he says, what you meant for evil, God meant for good. His attitude was something that we should all be reflecting on, isn't it?
Amazing. I mean, as you walk, even when he's in jail and, God's with him. There's something about Joseph. Joseph kept his heart right the whole time. So Joseph wasn't a ladies' man. Potiphar's wife kept saying, come to bed with me, come to bed. No, wasn't going there. He didn't have his hand in the till. Potiphar left him in charge of all his financial affairs. So we see utmost integrity in Joseph with finances, with members of the opposite sex. But there was something wrong with Joseph. He just had a bit of an ego. Remember, he told his brothers the dreams. Oh, look at this. And this is how it happened. And everybody bowed down to me. So I think God wanted to deal with Joseph's ego. And in dealing with his ego, when he's in jail, the butler and the baker, they have dreams. And he has the temerity to make this comment. He sees them and he says, what's up? They tell them that we've had these dreams. And he says, oh, dream interpretation belongs to God. Tell me. So for a moment, He was so full of his own self-importance, he presumed to be God in that situation. But something happened. He gave interpretations of the dreams. The dreams happened. The interpretations happened exactly as he said. But before they left the jail, the butler and the baker, Joseph said, but when you get out of here, remember me. And the next conversation, 25% is all about him. Me, 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 me. I, my, me, my. And I think, Joseph, you've got a big head. And God wanted to deal with his big head. And God dealt with Joseph for 13 years in jail.
Mm.
And then, upon his release, when Pharaoh is now having dreams and he can't work them out, the butler remembers Joseph as, 2 years later, come on, there's a guy in jail, he can interpret dreams. He comes out, he listens to Pharaoh's dreams, and Joseph doesn't say I, me, or my once. He says, God said, God has spoken to you. God is showing you what God is going to do. It's all about God. And for me, that's the inspiration, that his heart changes from me, me, my, I, to God. He is all about God. He was all about himself when he was having the dreams, when he had his nice coat. That's what fueled the hatred in his brothers. I'm not saying it was his fault. I'm not saying he was to blame, but they were the precipitating factors. And then he ends up now second in command in Egypt. And so forgiveness, look at the journey of forgiveness and what it does. And as you walk with God and as you allow God to deal with issues in your heart, that's what God does. He keeps his hand on you. His favor resides upon you. He grows you and matures you and develops you and perfects you, transforming you from one degree of glory to another. And that's what happened with Joseph. And for me, that's the inspiration. And that's why I love to go back to that book, that episode, and read it over and over again, because, Joseph allows God to deal with his heart. And that's all God's looking for in us, is if we will allow him. You haven't forgiven that person. Well, I tried. I can forgive, but I can't forget. No, you can't forget, because we've got a memory, and our memory isn't like God's, who says, I will remember your sin no more. But we remember. But real forgiveness means we can forgive to the extent that we don't. That thing is no longer an issue between me and you. So I'm inspired every time. I find something fresh and new every time I read that episode. And Joseph's life's an amazing, amazing inspiration. There's so much to learn. I actually wrote another book called Revolution of the Heart, which talks about the revolution of Joseph's heart being changed from this me, I person to all about God. It used to be called ego demolition, because God demolished Joseph's ego. But I thought, no, his heart was revolutionized. So I call it Revolution of the Heart. But yeah, Joseph is an extremely inspirational character. And then we see him in another aspect, that he's almost like a type of Christ. But that's another story altogether.
Mm. Who was the book written for?
For anybody and everybody. For those who walk in forgiveness. The book was written for those who walk in forgiveness, to encourage them to continue walking in forgiveness. The book was written also for those who find it difficult. So I want to forgive, but I don't know how to. So in the book, it explains how to forgive, how to do it, the process that you need to engage in to forgive a person. And it's for those who are saying, what's all this forgiveness thing about? Who want to learn, who want to understand. There are prayers in the back of the book. I don't remember how many now, maybe 7 or 8, maybe more. There are prayers encouraging you how to pray for someone that's done something, done this, or said that. Because we can say, oh God, I forgive them. But what does that mean? So we need to be very specific about who we are forgiving and why we are forgiving. But also recognizing that forgiveness is actually a choice, that we make it a deliberate and intentional choice. I choose to forgive by my will. I will choose to forgive so and so. and also to release that person into the freedom of forgiveness. And we're doing this with God. I'm doing this with God. I'm saying, God, I release Paul into the freedom of forgiveness. And I pray that God will be merciful to those who, inflict injury or pain upon me. I don't want vengeance. I say, God, be merciful to them. Because if it was the other way around, I would want them to pray mercy for me. So I pray mercy for them. Now, if the law has been broken, someone has murdered somebody. So in the case of my family members that were murdered and killed, they have to account to the law. So I forgive them, or forgave them, but that doesn't mean the judicial system cannot follow, or the role of justice doesn't get played out. Were they charged with murder? Yes. Were they charged with manslaughter? Yes. Were they prosecuted? Yes. Did they go to court? Yes. Did they go to jail? Yes. Some did, some didn't. But they have to account to the law, because murder isn't simply a crime against an individual and those left behind. It's a crime against society. So they have to account to society for their crime. So I explain about that forgiveness doesn't mean, it doesn't matter. So, okay, Sarah, it's okay. Let's all praise the Lord anyway. It's all fantastic. No, we've got to work out our forgiveness. But if they've broken the law, they have to account to the law and account to society for their crime. I can forgive you and you're forgiven as far as I'm concerned. But as far as the law's concerned, no, you've got to give an account. And are you such a dangerous person that society needs to be protected from you? So me forgiving this dangerous criminal isn't saying to society, they won't do it again. They're free to live, because they might go and do it again.
There seems to be a lot of trouble in the world. Is this a needed book for today?
Well, I feel so, Paul. I feel so. And I started writing it, it was 2 years ago, over 2 years ago. I keep forgetting we're just in 2026. And I set it down for a while, and I really felt prompted. I started to write another book and I felt God saying, no, go and finish that book. And I thought, but I want to finish this one, because I was nearly finished of the other one. He said, finish the 7 Tears of Joseph. So I thought, right, I'm going to finish the 7 Tears of Joseph. And I'll be quite honest, I've had lots of phone calls and emails and WhatsApp messages, people that have purchased the book and they've been really helped. And people have said they didn't know how to forgive, but it's taught them how to. It's the how to. We can always, it's very easy and cheap to throw out forgive, forgive, forgive. But how do I do it? When people know how to do it, they know how to do it and they're free to do it. I'm going to share an event that happened when I was in a church some years ago, and I was there for a week doing a crusade for a week in this church. And at the end, we would invite people to come to Christ, invite people to come up for healing. And a lady came up and she told me of an issue with her shoulder, that she couldn't move her arm. And it was something like about 6 inches, her elbow. She couldn't move 6 inches from her body because of her shoulder. Her shoulder wasn't frozen. There was something more serious with it. And she hadn't slept for months. She could not sleep properly. She never got a good night's sleep. And as she was talking to me and explaining her physical conditions, I got a word, and the word was unforgiveness. And so I said to her, I asked her a question. I said, is there anybody that you think you might need to forgive? Immediately she said yes. And she told me who it was, and she told me why she needed to forgive them. She told me what they had done to her, which was it was very serious, very awful. And the key was forgiveness. So I said, do you feel you could forgive this person? And she said, Elaine, I'd love to, but I don't know how to, because I keep remembering what they did. So I led her in a prayer. I said, if I lead you in a prayer to forgive this person, would you be willing to pray a prayer to forgive this person and to release them completely into forgiveness? She said, I would. So I prayed with her. Not a long prayer. We weren't there praying for ages, maybe a minute or 2 minutes max. And she said, thank you. And we had a hug, and she went on her way. Never prayed for her shoulder, never prayed for her insomnia. 2 nights later, she came back and she spoke to the pastor and said she wanted to give a testimony. And she gave a testimony of how we had prayed that night and she went home and had the best night's sleep she'd ever had.
Oh,
And to date, I know that she still sleeps well. And her shoulder was completely healed, the issue with her shoulder. So sometimes, I'm not all the time, forgiveness can impede healing. It can impede the answers to our prayers.
well, well. What's your website? How can people get a hold of this book?
Well, it's on Amazon. I believe it's on our website at www.godsmandate.org. But it's on Amazon, and it's on Amazon across the platforms on Amazon. And I think a few people have put reviews up of how it's helped them. But mainly the reviews I get are personal. People contact me and say, a gentleman contacted me and told me he'd bought the book, and something happened in his life with individuals over the pandemic, and he felt they were like irreconcilable, these issues. And he said, Elaine, I read the book. He said, and I dealt with it. He said, and everything's fantastic. Everything's brilliant. And sometimes it's simple things. It's not always the murder of the family member. It's not always, the terrible, terrible things. Sometimes it's just the small things, and then they get out of hand. But it is for us to walk as much as it's possible. The Bible says, as much as it depends on you, live at peace with all men. And forgiveness means me living at peace with you. And I can live at peace with you, and I should live at peace with you. And you know what? I want to live at peace with you. I don't want to be in disgruntlement and there's issues between us. And I'll say as well, Paul, sometimes if I feel, if I have a friend or I'm in a relationship with someone and I feel that there's something not right, I will say, I'm the first to say, is everything okay between me and you? And they'll say, well, it might not be because, and come on, let's move on. Life's too short. And or they'll say, no, it's not. There's everything's fine, everything's great. But I want to live in peace with people. I want to walk in forgiveness with individuals, and I feel those episodes where my family members were affected and afflicted. That's given me albeit a painful foundation, but a great foundation from which to live and to conduct a life of forgiveness.
Amen. Well, Elaine, thank you very much for sharing today.
No, thank you, Paul. Thank you for inviting me to share. It's been my privilege. And so, as I say, yeah, it's on Amazon, and deliberately made it affordable. So it's not an expensive book at all. Deliberately made it affordable so that finances would not be an issue.